All right, good afternoon, guys. Today I'm going to feature the tale of 3 jungle boots. For those of you who know me and have subscribed to my YouTube page, you know that the swamp is my playground and also my office. I work there pretty much every day of the week, working tracking dogs in combat and tactical tracking programs. So jungle boots are something that I rely on. I have to use almost every single day. And I go through them very, very quickly. They don't hold up in this really incredibly difficult environment for very long at all. So generally I get about 6 months to a year out of a pair of boots, and that's about it. Jungle boots are kind of a hard thing to come by. I mean, the big thing nowadays is Gore-Tex, waterproof, so on and so forth. And frankly, that's horrible for a jungle environment where wet feet and wet legs are just going to happen. The problem in the swamp, especially here in the southeastern United States, is that it is so wet and so humid that the conditions are really horrible for your feet. The last thing you want to use is Gore-Tex. The last thing you want is waterproof boots, because as soon as that water goes over the top of your boots and gets inside, your feet are going to stay wet all day unless you take them off and dry out your socks and your feet. Realistically speaking, in training and in deployment, you just can't do that. You need a shoe that expels the water and that can dry on the run. So it's important that shoes have drain holes, not waterproof, not Gore-Tex. And so the old school jungle boots are really the boot suited for this type of environment in the southeastern United States or jungles in general. Now, what I came up with was the old Vietnam style jungle boot, and the McRae here is a perfect example of that. And the McRae is a great boot, solid leather upper, nylon canvas side, with what we call the Panama sole. Now, what's so great about the Panama sole is that these big open spaces make it so the mud doesn't get compacted in here quite as much. Now, I say quite because it will still get stuck in there. It's just not like a waffle sole that we're so familiar with. So these big open spaces on the Panama sole are really a great thing for that jungle type environment. Now, also, they have the drain holes in the side. Now, the pluses for the McRae style jungle boot are this. Number one, super, super sturdy. I mean, wonderfully put together boot, great leather, great canvas. These things last a long time. The bottom line, though, is that the soles are relatively stiff, so too is the leather. It takes a while to get these things broken in. But once broken in, folks, these are a great mainstay. And I know why our military uses them so much in Vietnam. And you know, in the jungles around the world. It's because it's a great jungle boot. They're fantastic. The only thing I can say about this boot that I don't like is it takes a while to break them in. They're a little bit stiff. But other than that, this is a fantastic go-to boot, and I recommend it over and over and over again. And a big plus is it's built here in the United States. The McRae boot is really, really well put together. It's a fantastic jungle boot. But it does take a little while to break it in. For our type of environment, if you're doing any type of tactical exercises in a jungle-like environment or in the southeastern United States in the swamps, this is a great boot. It's going to keep your feet in good condition and make sure you don't get that trench foot going on. The next boot that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is another one that I've used quite a bit. It's the Nike jungle boot. The Nike is patterned after the McRae to a certain extent, the same type of style, but it's a much lighter boot, much lighter. It still has the drain holes in the side. The sole on the bottom is a little bit different. So you still have these big wide open spaces here, so it doesn't hold the mud quite as well. But the water leaks out of the sole and then out of these eyelets. Now, what I like about the Nike is that it's a fantastic boot. It doesn't take a lot of breaking in. It lasts in the jungle type environment for a good amount of time. I usually start getting about 6 months of wear in the swamps before they start breaking down. And the breaking down that really occurs the most is right around here. You can see how the sole starts to separate from the leather. And I just think that this is from a lot of wear and a lot of tear. But other than that, it's a pretty good boot. Now, what's the downfall of the Nike? Well, Nike is Nike. Very anti-law enforcement. Generally speaking, I don't believe that it's a very strong American company. And of course, it's an imported boot. So I'm not a big fan of Nike. Even though I love this boot in the jungle, I will probably never buy it again with Nike's stance in law enforcement and against our military in general. Not a big fan of Nike. The next boot I love so much is another one that's kind of relatively new on the scene. They've patterned this boot after the old Panama sole McRae jungle boot, and it's called a Go Ruck. The Go Ruck is very, very similar in pattern and in style. The big difference is the leather is a lot softer. It's a lot more comfortable boot, and the sole is quite a bit different. Now you'll see on this sole, we don't have a lot of depth to the tread. Not a lot of depth to the tread. Now what I found with this boot is even with the drain holes, it drains water quite nicely. There's almost absolutely no break-in period for this boot. It's fantastic. Probably, I would say hands down, the most comfortable boot I've ever worn in my entire life. The insert inside is really, really fantastic. It's removable, quite comfortable, and I think this has a lot to do with it. It's a really, really soft padding, but the boot is just right out of the box, something that you can wear immediately. The pros of this are comfort, absolute comfort, urban, rural, jungle, no matter what. I love it. The speed laces are very, very fantastic. It's an American-made boot, military, law enforcement friendly. I support them 100%. So what's the downfall? Well, the downfall is the sole of the boot, again, which I mentioned almost initially. This is fantastic for a rural or an urban environment, but in the jungle, in the swamps with slippery mud, not so great. You don't get a lot of traction in this, and your feet do slip out from underneath you a little bit. So you got to be a little bit more careful with this boot. Now, the big difference between the two is what you can see right here, okay? Very, very significant difference. The Panama sole is very wide-spaced and opened, and the tread pattern is so severe that you get great traction no matter where you go. The Ruck, on the other hand, not so much. It's quite comfortable for running, walking, moving in, but it's not so great for, you know, situations where you need a lot of traction in slick mud. But from a comfort standpoint, I'd say the Go Ruck is a little bit stronger. Now, where do I like this boot? I like this boot for just general overall tracking work that I have to do. Definitely urban, definitely rural, definitely cement where it's really, really comfort. But where it's supposed to go in the jungle, I don't know. I think I'm going to always opt for the McRae Panama style sole. I just think it's a little bit better. So folks, these are the three boots. We have the old McRae Panama style jungle boot. We have the Nike with their improved, or what they think is an improved sole. And then we have the Go Ruck right here, the Go Ruck. And of these three boots, as they're intended for jungle purposes, I have to give my vote to the old style Vietnam McRae jungle boot with the Panama sole. Close second, very, very close second. And actually number one in any other type of environment is going to be the Go Ruck, just out of sheer comfort. This is a beautiful boot. Anyway, hope you guys like this review, and hope these boots can come in handy for you in the future. I highly recommend these two. Even though Nike is a great boot, very anti-law enforcement, I can't go with them at all any longer.